Okay, let me read a poem about Liberia. And this poem is called Send Me Some Black Clothes. Elegy for my homecoming. Sweet sorrow of family reunion around the dead. So I get dressed for another funeral. But I'm almost ashamed to burden my friends with news of another dead relative. As if I were some storehouse of dead people. As if I could earn a living announcing news of my dead or dying brothers and sisters. I returned home walking into a place of dead bodies here in Morovia, only corpses, the same manner in which I left decades ago, walking through dead bodies of my people during the war. Someone please send me some black clothes. Liberians are dying like earthworms after a long rainy night, dying the way centipedes crawl out of a burning shed to die quietly. They say life has many zigzags, many humps. They say if you live long enough, you will see something. Sese Jue, the woman named after my Ai, of whom I sing in my poems, of whom I've strung these grable words around verses. Ai's namesake has died, so Uncle Robert travels 500 miles of rugged terrain by road and dust because there's no room to make excuses not to bury your sister. So here I am, lost daughter, come home from something else, and I find myself standing among caskets. Life has rotted away the remains of lack when a country decides to rise up not from the ankles but from the head, as those at the ankles die of lack. As if living in lack were a curse, I say, send me second morning clothes to spread along the footpaths so millipedes can crawl. Send me some second morning clothes, my people. Please, Liberia smells again of corpses. The poor are burying their dead, so let the river swell in rage. Let drums cry dirges against the wind. Let mutiny break out upon the town. There is too much death in town, so I ask for the town crier. He too is dead. Ask for the horn blower. He too is dead. Ask for the bodier too is dead. Ask for the young virgins and the suitors that used to line the roads. They are all dead. Someone please holler for me. Someone please send me some black La Paz to cover the ground in the Hamilton dew.
I've connected with that in a way. But there's a lot of pain in that, isn't there?
Yes, yes,
There's a hell of a lot of pain in
yes.
that. Is that about the civil war that is?
Yes, that a lot of times my poems sometimes are prophecies. It's very strange. I wrote this entire book in 2013 when I was on sabbatical for 6 months in Liberia. Okay, that's when I wrote this whole book, and then I published. The book was published 2 years later. But I read the poem there when I was there, and people connected to the war. But about maybe 8 months after I left, then Ebola came. And then people were dying just like this. Like if one person died of Ebola, if 10 people live in a house, they all died. They just died one after the other. And by the time the Ebola was done with the country, I think 2 months, there were like 6,000 dead of Ebola. So because with Ebola, and if somebody is ill with Ebola and you touch them, the sweat getting in your hands will infect you. So and then
That was
Yeah, yeah, that's how terrible Ebola is. So that is the strange part. So then people were saying the poem was actually about Ebola, even though the poem was about part of what happened in the war, you know. But the time I was there, people were dying. I was there for like 6 months. I think I buried 4 or 5 close relatives. Okay, and every now and then somebody would die, you go to a funeral, and then another person would die, and then you go to a funeral. Because one of the things that war does is that after a war ends, 14-year war, and the repercussion is like a domino action. So for years, people who did not get health care, did not get to eat well, kids who were drinking too much and doing drugs because they were frustrated, begin to die of liver disease and all kinds of stuff. And the hospitals are all broken down. So that's what I was writing about. But then a few months later, the Ebola struck and was just like, yes, you know, people couldn't even bury the dead. They were doing mass burial. You know, they had they had centers where if you got ill, they would test you and then throw you in a center, and you were meant to die. You know, and
Where did Ebola come from?
that, well, I don't want to talk about it on camera.
I can edit it out. This is
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a personal
No,
thing.
no. Well, there are all kinds of theories. There are theories that, and I think a few months before Ebola broke out, there was immunization of young kids in a certain town in Guinea that was very close to the Liberian border. And that's where the Ebola started. Right after they immunized young children, 2 kids got infected with the Ebola virus. And then they infected their parents, and the parents walk across the border. And because we share a land border with Guinea, West Africa, and they went to the clinics across the border in Liberia, and because the borders were created by colonial masters, even though Guinea speaks French, then people have relatives across the borderline, and people don't regard the borders as anything. They just walk across, and these people walked across and went to a clinic and infected the doctors and nurses, and all those doctors and nurses died. The patients that walked in died. The nurses and doctors died. Some people in the
So the
clinic.
person walks from the border of
Mm-hmm.
Guinea to a hospital.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When all the first people that were dying were the hospital, the
Those
doctors
are
and nurses,
those are the
because
first.
they were, yeah, and they kept dying because they were taking care of the sick patients. You know, they were the ones taking care.
It's hard not to. It's hard.
Even the one Ebola patient that went into Nigeria, and he went to the hospital. The doctor that treated him was a famous female doctor. She died.
It's almost too perfect for it not to be black.
Not the Yeah, they say in fact they just started a new one in Congo, in the Congo, recently. Yeah, so yes. But let's get on with our
You've
interview.
been